Hi guys, Stem Cell here. Today we're going to get into the Russian submarine incident off of Spain and go over some history and interesting facts. Imagine a Russian submarine. So let's get into it. Imagine a Russian submarine stranded or suffering severe malfunction floating or hovering near Spanish waters. What would that mean geopolitically? What clues would we glean? Today we explore a reported Russian submarine incident off of Spain and dig into the dramatic historical submarine failure from the 1990s. You'll learn surprising facts about Cold War sub-tech, safety features, and what happens when the deep sea goes wrong. Alright, well, let's get into it. So, in October 2023, a Kilo class Russian submarine and a companion tugboat. Strangely, this is not the most recent incident, but this has happened before. We were tracked by a Spanish naval asset as they transitioned near the Baltic Islands. A Spanish Ministry of Defense clarified that at no time did the sub enter Spanish territorial waters, but it wasn't operated in areas of Spanish interest. So the Spanish maritime action vessel Rayo escorted them until they left. More recently, today, 2025, Spanish naval frigate has monitored a Russian submarine, especially the Kilo class. I don't know how to say the name, the Noroskus, as it traveled from eastern Mediterranean through waters influenced by the Spanish. The Kilo class is a diesel-electric attack submarine originally designed in the Soviet era. They entered service from the 1980s and onward. These Russian subs were considered relatively quiet in their class and served as a workhorse of conventional naval operations when no nuclear propulsion is needed. In this case, sources don't confirm a mechanical breakdown failure. Rather, Spanish forces monitored, escorted the Russian vessels when they approached the zone of strategic interest. However, the notion of a submarine breaking down can sometimes include silent propulsion failure, battery or generator failure, or needing tug assistance. The presence of a tug with the sub suggests one of the possibilities. The sub might have had a limited self-propulsion or was being deployed in a way requiring surface support. It shows Russia continues naval activity in the Mediterranean and adjacent waters, and Spain, as a NATO member, is actively monitoring and maintaining maritime security. It underscores how even conventional subs are strategic assets, that smaller incidents can be diplomatic or military flashpoints. The escort of a submarine with a tug nearby Spain raises questions. Was the submarine already compromised? Was the tug provided logistical support, or was it as helping in a semi-disabled state? So in other words, was it broken, pretty much? And I believe what's happening with this current sub is supposedly a fuel line has potentially come loose or is leaking diesel fuel. Anyways, so I want to go over something that happened in the 90s that's pretty relevant. So to give some context, let's look at the submarine mishaps and failures, especially during the 1990 period of geopolitical and military transition. After the collapse of the Soviet Union in 1991, Russia's military funding dropped dramatically, causing maintenance, training, and safeguard regiments to degrade. Many submarines that once had a tight culture of safety and resources began suffering more frequent technical failures. Observers note in the 1990s were a weak period for naval readiness in Russia. Some submarines accidentally were linked to old or degraded systems, lack of spare parts, or human error under stressful conditions. One of the most famous Soviet-Russian submarines disaster, the Kursk, which sank in the 2000s, right after the 1990 era. The cause was failed torpedo explosion that had triggered secondary detonation. All 118 crew perished. While at that event didn't occur near Spain, embellics how catastrophic things can go wrong when technical failures combined with operational stress. So I want to show you guys a real quick video. This is the Russian submarine right here. You can see it's missing the whole entire front of it, and these actually have a dual hull. You can see there's a hole there, and then there's this right here. And this is supposed to, make it a lot safer. In other words, if like it gets hit by a submarine, well, it only hits right here, and it might not necessarily break into this hole. But what had happened is they had some sort of a malfunction with a torpedo, and they were trying to test it. Somehow safety regulations weren't happening because it wasn't being funded enough. Anyways, they tried to shoot it, and boom, that was the front of it. And the rest of the crew was actually in this area back here. And NATO, I believe it was Norway or Denmark, had offered to go and try and rescue the crew at the time, because Russia didn't have this type of technology back then, or any they didn't have something that could go down that deep, in other words, and so only NATO had something that could actually maybe go save the crew. But they waited, oh geez, it was a long time. It was like a week before then they finally asked for help, and by that time, sadly, the crew had all died, all 118. I don't know how many died in the first explosion, but they were able to get to the submarine, and then they pulled it up. And yeah, this was a big thing back in the 90s. Here, let's watch this for a second.
The investigations. Unfortunately, the front hull had to be cut off and left behind, and the primary evidence was lost.
So in other words, they had to cut this part off because it still had torpedoes in it, but it had blown a lot of it off anyway. So they just cut the submarine right there, and that way they left the torpedoes down at the bottom, but it also left some of the evidence. Okay, it is possible in the 90s submarines occasionally lost power, had battery failure, or needed rescue or towing, but many such incidences were also kept secret, underreported because of military secrecy. And this is kind of what I mean. They didn't want to admit something bad had happened when they should have just asked for help. Then we could actually save these sailors. And I know the Russian public was not happy about this situation. Also, some Western naval surveillance operations did intercept or monitor Soviet-Russian submarines during that area, sometimes forcing them to surface or retreat, which might be misinterpreted as a breakdown by observers. So I wanna kind of go over some interesting facts here. So let's quickly. So this is the report from today at 5:12 a.m. wherever in Spain. But Russian Kilo submarine, the Noscus, I have no idea how to say that, guys, suffered an accident in the Mediterranean Sea. Fuel is now leaking directly into the hull due to a damaged fuel system. So let's go over some interesting facts now. Diesel and nuclear subs. Diesel electric subs like Kilo class are quieter when running on batteries. No reactor noise. So they can be much quieter, but they have to come up and recharge their batteries, get air. Definitely way like a nuclear sub is so much better than this. But they're much cheaper. But they need to surface or snorkel periodically to recharge. If the battery or charging system fails, they can be stranded. Tugs and submarines. Seeing a submarine escorted by a tug is unusual. A tug might accompany a sub if it begins delivering delivered, respond, or potentially suffered propulsion issues. So instead of fixing the sub, they just have a tug follow it around. That's pretty ironic. It's like, well, maybe you don't have the money to run the sub, so maybe if you don't want things to break when you know they're broken, don't use that sub and maybe have less of them. So stealth and tracking paradoxes. Submarines are designed to avoid detection, but when near territorial waters of other states, navies actively monitor them. For instance, the Spanish Navy, using a frigate to shadow Russian subs, demonstrate how anti-submarine tracking capabilities remain vital. Many Soviet-era submarines remained in service far past their original design lifespan, leading to wear, material fatigue, and high failure. Submarine failure are often hidden or manipulated in public narratives to avoid diplomatic fallout or moral loss. The Russians' response to the Kursk is a classic example of delayed rescue, censorship, and control of information. Wow, hasn't that just gotten worse since then? When a submarine is disabled underwater, rescue is extremely difficult. Pressure, depth, mechanical complexity, and time constraint all contribute to make every extra hour fatal. In many submarine failures, nations are reluctant to accept foreign assistance. This sometimes worsens the outcome. Even when a submarine is not broken, sending a sub near another country's water is a strong signal of Navy reach, power projection, or testing responses. So I believe that's what's going on right now, is Russia is testing our resolve, especially with all these drone incursions, and like this ship was in it was in international waters. But let's go ahead. The Russian Kilo class submarine, the Noscus, had suffered an accident in the Mediterranean Sea. Doesn't require yada yada. Let's just take a look at this picture real quick. Okay. So it has land attack cruise missiles. Interesting. I didn't know that. Supersonic anti-ship missiles, supersonic terminal stage, launch booster, submarine launch capsules. Sorry. There's the mast right there. This is kind of showing how the propulsion works there. Essentially, a diesel just charges batteries, and I believe that's the diesel right there. It charges batteries, which runs an electric motor, and then that spins the shaft and powers the ship off of the batteries. So anyways, this can make it very quiet, but when it has to go up and charge its battery, it's pretty inconvenient, especially if you're not trying to let anyone know that you're there. And this right here, they use compressed air to shoot out the torpedoes right here, if you can see, which the torpedoes are massive. Anyways, you can imagine what would happen if one of those exploded, and I believe they cut it back all the way to here somewhere on that other sub. But you know, guys, if this was interesting, please subscribe, like, comment, share it around, most importantly. And oh, I have one more thing to show you. So this is what this makes me think of Russian subs here. Right, let's go ahead and watch it. Right. Underwater diver. What?
Okay. All right.
Oh, gosh.
All right.
So, just to explain, guys, this guy went down with the ship, and somehow an air bubble got caught. In where he was at, so he got caught in an air bubble. Anyways, he survived. I believe this like 2 days after the ship actually went down. It might have even been longer, like I can't remember if it was a week. 60 hours underwater, so he was down there for 60 hours. Technically he should have ran out of oxygen, but dude, here he is, and this guy diving down there is expecting to find bodies, and he finds this guy. Anyways, this reminds me of the Russian Navy. That's what I think of Russia. You know, they're like, they're not as scary as a lot of people like to put off. Anyways, again, like and subscribe, guys, and I will catch you here on the next one.